Hello and welcome to India's World. During the visit of Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to Kabul in the third week of May, Afghanistan and Pakistan signed an agreement for bilateral intelligence cooperation. The agreement enables a partnership between the spy agencies of the two countries, Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence and the Afghan National Directorate of Security. Although the agreement has been described as historic in Pakistan, experts are not very optimistic about its outcome, citing the lack of trust between the two countries. In the past, the Afghan government has openly accused Pakistan of harboring, nurturing and aiding the Taliban to launch a war against the Afghan people. The Afghan parliament has already expressed its opposition to the deal, and so have several Afghan security experts. They want President Ashraf Ghani to scrap the deal. To discuss the implications of the intelligence sharing agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Vivek Katju. He's been India's ambassador to Afghanistan, Myanmar and Thailand. He handled the Afghanistan-Pakistan desk of the Foreign Office for 6 years or more. And we have with us Ambassador Rakesh Sood. He's been India's ambassador to Afghanistan and Nepal and has also served as India's permanent representative and ambassador to the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. And we are also lucky to have with us Mr. Rana, Banerjee, a former Indian Administrative Service officer. He was Special Secretary in India's External Intelligence Agency, the Research and Analysis Wing, or R&AW. He's an expert on security intelligence, and his expertise is on South Asia. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. Vivek, let me begin with you. Former President Hamid Karzai, who's a friend of yours, had openly criticized and charged the Pakistan Army and the ISI of orchestrating attacks not only on Afghan leaders and individuals, but also the international troops in that country, saying that Pakistan was providing logistical support to the Taliban who were launching these attacks. Now, do you think his successor Ashraf Ghani wants to start afresh and wants to give Pakistan a second chance by signing this bilateral intelligence cooperation agreement?
Initially, when President Karzai took over as the head of the interim administration in 2001, November 2001, after the Bonn Agreement, he himself went out of his way court Pakistan, and he pursued with that policy for more than a year and a half or almost 2 years. It was when he found that the Pakistanis were not willing to give an inch by way of diminishing support or reducing support for the Taliban, that they were not willing to have a policy of normalization towards Afghanistan, that he turned. Now, Ashraf Ghani is trying to reinvent the wheel. And logically, he felt that Afghanistan, if it has good relations with Pakistan, it will be, many of its problems would get resolved. But he hadn't learned from Karzai's experience, and it's surprising that he didn't, because he himself, during this period, when Karzai was courting the Pakistanis, was the finance minister and a member of Karzai's sort of inner team. I think Ghani went, it was not so much as a fresh start, as perhaps under some kind of pressure from the Americans, but also because he thinks in many ways like a scholar. And if logic dictates that you must, then he forgets the attendant facts.
Okay. Rakesh, has nothing changed since Karzai left, or has something changed? Has greater trust developed between Ashraf Ghani and the Pakistani establishment? Has the number of attacks on Afghan targets and the frequency of these attacks, has it gone down? Has it petered off? What has happened? Or is it merely, as Vivek says, he's reinventing the wheel?
I think that the compulsion was also because, the compulsion on President Ashraf Ghani was also because, you know, first and foremost, that the election was a suspect election. I mean, the election results were never declared. And it was basically a lot of US diplomatic heavy lifting. You know, John Kerry was there twice. There were n number of phone calls made by John Kerry as well as by President Obama to both Dr. Ashraf Ghani as well as to Dr. Abdullah. Now, this was a lot of political capital, US political capital was invested in ensuring that the election should be carried forward, and the only way to do it forward was to create something called the National Unity Government with President Ashraf Ghani as the president and Dr. Abdullah as the CEO, a post which is yet to actually develop with concrete powers and all the rest of it. Now, given the fact that in end of 2016, you have elections in the US, so therefore there was a 2-year time window essentially for President Ashraf Ghani to try and see how far he could go in terms of creating the, moving the peace process forward in order to establish stability in Afghanistan. So he is leaning or hoping to lean on the US to be able to put pressure on Pakistan, and as Vivek said, trying to reinvent the wheel because his time frame is compressed.
Okay. Mr. Banerjee, do you think President Ghani's overture to Pakistan is naive, as some Afghans have said, and could it work against Afghanistan's national interests, as they've argued?
It could, yes, but to add to what Vivek and Rakesh have said, the perception in Pakistan definitely was that Ghani is reaching out and making a definite departure from the past policies. And his visit to the army headquarters in Pakistan, when in Islamabad, when he first came to visit Pakistan after becoming president, was certainly seen as...
Is it rare for an Afghan president to visit GHQ?
Yes, it was unusual. It's never done. It's not protocol. Okay. So reaching out in that manner, then subsequently almost endorsing the ISI's plan or effort to try to get Fazlullah over from the Afghan side.
He's the Taliban Pakistan.
Mullah Fazlullah of the Taliban Pakistan. Also, Latif Afridi, who was one of the interlocutors of the Haqqani network who had been arrested by the Afghans. They were also handed over to the Pakistanis, though this is kept under the wraps. So it was a reaching out which was definitely a departure, and it was being seen as a major U-turn and a friendly gesture by observers in Pakistan, saying that, well, now this would be precursor to reduction of Indian influence in Afghanistan.
But can the present deal go against Afghanistan's national interests, as some people are arguing, instead of going in favor of Afghanistan's interests?
Yes, indeed it might, if you see the record of duplicity of the Pakistani agencies and establishment. So it could.
All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing the implications of the bilateral intelligence sharing agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Vivek, media reports emanating from Pakistan and re-reported, as it were, in Afghan press suggests that the agreement between the two countries would allow the ISI to equip the NDS, the National Defense Directorate of Security, and train its personnel. Now, does this mean that under the name of bilateral intelligence cooperation, the agreement with Pakistan could allow the ISI to penetrate deep into the Afghan security establishment?
I think Rana will be in a better position to give you an answer to that. But let me say that on the face of it, it is obvious that that such kind of an agreement where you allow an agency which has always been hostile to Afghanistan's interests and is perceived as such among the majority of the Afghans. In fact, the agency that is considered to be responsible for almost all the troubles of Afghanistan is being allowed to penetrate very deeply within the external agency of Afghanistan is naturally compromising interest.
Well, you see, Asim Bajwa's tweet, the DG ISPR's tweet, mentioned intelligence sharing and complementary and coordinated operations as part of this agreement. The reports on training have been denied by Afghan sources. So even to have this type of coordinated and complementary operations would need a lot of trust, and this trust has not been there because the NDS has been predominantly peopled by Tajik officials in historical terms. There are Pashtun officers, so the penetration, if at all, the ISI could depend on would be through lower level Pashtun functionaries. So I don't think that it would be very successful attempt ab initio.
Quickly.
My experience has been that Pashtuns are as wary of the ISI as the Tajiks. That suspicion of the ISI cuts across all ethnic groups in Afghanistan. So Rana, there I'll disagree with you.
Okay. Ambassador Rakesh, so what has been the level of opposition to the bilateral intelligence cooperation deal? I mean, if you look at the tweets of former NSA Amrullah Saleh, for example, he says intelligence coordination with the ISI means doubting Pak duplicity in terror, dishonoring ANDSF, that is Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, their sacrifices, and falling into the trap of deception. Would you agree with him?
Well, I think that there has been widespread opposition to this agreement from within Afghanistan, and the reason in one word is Afghan nationalism. You know, Afghan nationalism is a very powerful emotion, and it cuts across ethnic lines. So whether Pashtun or Tajik, if you recall, the present head of NDS, he refused to sign this agreement. He said, I cannot support it, and it was the deputy.
But do you believe that Rahmatullah Nabil, who's an employee of the president, appointee of the president, would refuse to sign a deal?
Well, I mean, you know, the revolt would come out into the open. See, the CEO, Dr. Abdullah, has been cautious, but it is quite clear that he is not fully supportive of this, because he is reported to have said that when the text was shown to him, since that time, after the agreement was actually signed, there are new elements in it about which he was unaware. This is what he is reported to have said. President Karzai has been critical of it, Amrullah Saleh has been critical of it, and a large number of members of parliament have been critical of it. In fact, they had called in the National Security Advisor Hanif Atmar for a question-answer session, which was cancelled at the last minute.
No, Hanif Atmar was travelling abroad, but Rahmatullah Nabil went there and he said that this is only a draft agreement, and that is why it was signed at the level of his deputy, that this was not final. This is what he told
given the implications,
Jirga, or the lower house of parliament.
Given the political significance, coming as it is following the political outreach with Dr. Ashraf Ghani made towards Pakistan, given the fact that he has visited Islamabad, he made the gesture of visiting GHQ, the army headquarters, given the fact that the DGISI has been now twice to Islamabad. I mean, this is part of an outreach process, and I think it is a lame excuse to say that this was just a draft and therefore signed at the level of deputies. It has created enormous internal turmoil within Afghan society.
How serious is the internal turmoil in Afghanistan? Is the Afghan National Unity Government vertically divided? Because what one hears and what one reads is that President Ashraf Ghani and his National Security Advisor Hanif Atmar are on one side, and rest of them are either opposed to it or are keeping mum.
There's been a lot of tension. In fact, there's been a public rally in Kapisa against this agreement specifically. Also, it has to be seen in the context of the Taliban, spring offensive, which hasn't been stalled despite strong calls from the Pakistani leadership not to have such an offensive. So, there is a question of delivering on the agreement from both sides, which is being seen as increasingly one-sided. So, Afghans are very unhappy.
Vivek, in this context, how effective are the steps to retrace, as it were, the bilateral agreement? For example, saying that it's a draft agreement, or even the leaked letter of President Ghani to Nawaz Sharif, which makes peremptory demands on Pakistan, asking them to condemn the Taliban, says that the Pakistan army should issue a directive to deny sanctuary to Afghan Taliban and arrest all those Taliban who've been involved in terrorist attacks in Afghanistan.
Obviously, Ghani and Atmar are now on the back foot. I think they didn't anticipate that there will be such a public outcry, which of course is itself indicative of political naivety on Ghani's part. Now, what is Ghani trying today? Clearly, as you rightly noted, the tone of that letter, which is clearly been sent because it has been authoritatively leaked, in a sense, quote unquote authoritatively, is such that no Pakistani, self-respecting Pakistani, can accept that. An ultimatum of 3 weeks, that you either submit or the window which we've given you of opportunity will close. So what is Ghani now trying? Is he trying to retrieve lost ground in the Afghan system? Or is this some kind of a choreographed thing with the Pakistanis that I have to do this because of...
You tell us. What do you think?
No, I don't think the tone of the letter and the phrases used indicate to me that this letter bears Ghani's imprint.
No, but clearly. To what purpose? To sort of backtrack from the deal?
No, I think Ghani has been cut to the quick. Ghani feels the deal has to be operationalized. You can sign any piece of paper as long as it's not operationalized. It doesn't matter. Okay. So the deal is not the only thing. The whole thing is this approach towards Pakistan. That is what is riling everyone. And there, I think Ghani has realized he's gone too far, too quickly.
All right. So let's see if we can backtrack. But we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the implications of the bilateral intelligence cooperation deal between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Rakesh, before we went on the break, you wanted to say something.
You know, Ashraf Ghani's letter to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, I think there are 3 quick points. First, there is no doubt that Ashraf Ghani was taken aback by the extent of domestic opposition to this agreement. Now, it would have helped him if the Taliban spring offensive had been moderated or had not come in to the extent to which it has. But this has easily been one of the most vicious spring offensives launched by the Taliban in the last decade. So clearly, he has been unable to deliver on that. Therefore, the letter is not just a message to the Pakistani establishment. I mean, you can more or less say that a carbon copy of the letter CC would have gone to the GHQ as well. But it is also a message to the American establishment saying that, look, unless you are prepared to put the Pakistani army's feet to the fire, it is going to be very difficult to be able to sustain a national unity government on this question.
Mr. Banerjee, you know, this letter and whatever is happening in Afghanistan is there. Nobody is denying that. But at the same time, what is wrong if a new president is trying to bring stability to his country? He knows, as well as any other Afghan, that the main source of their woes lies in Pakistan. So unless you get Pakistan on board and be friendly towards Pakistan, convert your enmity with Pakistan into friendship, nothing is going to happen in Afghanistan. Afghanistan will not stabilize. So why run down this effort?
No, theoretically you're absolutely right. But there were 2 other premises to this, that he also went to China to approach the Chinese to put pressure on the Pakistanis to deliver. The Pakistanis are taking the standard ploy that, look, we have influence on the Taliban, but not enough to control their actions entirely. Also, there is the statement by the Taliban spokesman today that we don't entirely listen completely to the Pakistanis. We are independent people. I mean, regarding Chinese influence also obliquely, they have mentioned this. And side by side, there is the backdrop of the reconciliation process, which is proceeding apace. The Pugwash was holding this conference in Urumqi. Before that, there was the Al-Khor, statement in Qatar, where, there was some unanimity of views on what needs to be done for the future. So that process, as long as it goes further, I think Ghani will be able to manage this dissent regarding the agreement. Okay. And the result will then be depending on what progress in the reconciliation process.
So, Vivek, on the one hand, you have various overtures being made to the Taliban to negotiate, although nobody knows whether these are official, they have official sanction of both the sides or they don't. Pugwash, after all, you can't say it had the sanction of Afghan government and it had the all the shuras of the Taliban were involved, or even in the meeting that took place in Urumqi, it's not clear who were they representing. Now the point is, on the one hand you want to talk to the Taliban, on the other hand President Ghani in his letter to Pakistan says act against the Afghan Taliban for acting against a friendly state and put the Quetta Shura and the Peshawar Shura under house arrest. Now if you criminalize the Taliban, how on earth are you going to negotiate with them?
I say, Let's be clear. A statesman has to not go on theoretical propositions, but he has to go on the weight of experience and tradition and the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground are, one, that the Taliban have no interest in really having any kind of accommodation in the power structures. They want it all. They want a revival of the Islamic Emirate. Fact number two, that Pakistan's historical desire to have strategic depth, which in fact means having predominant influence over the foreign policies, especially the India policy of the Afghan government, remains intact. Given these two propositions, can there be any success in the venture that Ashraf Ghani has undertaken in mending fences with Pakistan? Now, as far as the Americans are concerned, they weren't able to change Pakistan's approaches. They lost over 2,000 boys to Pakistani sponsored violence in Afghanistan. So, given these facts, is it possible for us to do this theoretical sort of scenario painting and be optimistic?
Okay, so let me take the US angle to Rakesh. Now, if the US couldn't control Pakistani behavior, and you were suggesting earlier it's the US which is, and the US political compulsions which are also sort of pressuring Ashraf Ghani into making this overture. So if they couldn't handle Pakistan and the Taliban, how do they expect Ashraf Ghani to achieve that goal for them?
Well, it is not that they expect Ashraf Ghani to achieve that goal. I think the relationship between President Hamid Karzai and General Musharraf, he was then the CEO, that relationship had become a very strained relationship. And as Vivek said, once Karzai realized that the root cause of his problems, security problems, lay across the border, he made no bones about it. He was very, very categorical about it and very open about it. Now, therefore, there was a feeling that perhaps with the change of guard in Kabul, things could take a new turn. And obviously, there was also a change of guard taking place in Islamabad. There was a new set of generals who had come in, both in the ISI as well as the army chief. President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry, they know that they had 2 years. This is part of their legacy. Obama is going out. He said he would wind down, he would withdraw from both the Iraqi and the Afghan theaters. So they are invested to ensure a degree of stability as things wind down.
Yeah, but my question...
this is the effort. So I think part of the message from Ashraf Ghani is also to Washington, saying that, look, I'm doing this for you, but you need to also put pressure on Pakistan.
The question is, will it be effective?
Well, that is a moot point.
But, this business of new set of people doing new things sort of doesn't recognize that the problems are structural and there are national interests involved. It's not personal chemistry that will solve Afghanistan-Pakistan problem. So, so do you agree with this, that there are structural issues which cannot be solved just because Ashraf Ghani likes Nawaz Sharif or he likes General Rahil Sharif?
No, it's not merely that. You see, there is a change in approach also in Pakistan to a certain extent, which says that stability in Afghanistan is important for stability in Pakistan inside, and to sort of keep the terrorism issue which is hurting the establishment in Pakistan in some sort of control.
Okay. All right, we are running out of time, so my last question to all of you, and a quick answer from all of you please, is what would be the cost to India of growing closeness between the new Afghan dispensation and Pakistan, if indeed they get close?
Well, if they get close, it's a negative for our interests, because they'll get close at our cost in Afghanistan. Okay. And we've got to be very, very concerned with these developments, and we've got an array of options in Afghanistan which we need to activate.
Okay. Rakesh, what are these areas of options he's hinting at?
I think the options that we are looking at are options which would end up creating certain amount of polarization within society. But the point I would like to emphasize is that if the agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan, if it actually has to yield a positive outcome, then it means that it also has to contribute to Afghanistan's stability. Now, so far, our discussion has been whether there is that convergence of views possible or not possible. As you yourself said, there are structural issues here.
Right. Okay, we are running out of time. Last word.
Yeah,
please.
for India it will be bad, but we need to be patient and watch it unravel. And there are, of course, several options.
All right, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, Mr. Rana, Banerjee, Ambassador Rakesh, Sood, Ambassador Vivek, Katju, for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching India's World.